A week is a long time in politics, isn't it?
It is. It is a long time.
Because here we are.
Yeah.
We're recording on Thursday, so it's a week on from Election Day.
Yeah.
And yesterday, Wednesday, Keir Starmer was in the Oval Office with
Prime Minister Keir Starmer.
Prime Minister Keir Starmer was in the Oval Office with President Joe Biden,
who wasn't sure where he was.
He didn't know where he was, but Keir did, so it was okay. And I was thinking how unbelievably, savagely, brutally instant the transfer of power is in this country.
Yes.
1 minute Rishi Sunak is still Prime Minister and making mistakes, and now already Starmer's at his first summit.
That's right. I mean, when you think, because we're used to it, we think that's normal. But when you think about other democracies, notably the States, you get 2 months, don't you?
Yeah, there's no transition. It's 1 minute you're at a football ground telling people your father was a toolmaker. The next minute you're a power player in Washington talking about NATO.
That's right.
Shall we have a blast of
Let's have a blast
Mr. Starmer and Mr. Biden?
Good news. Good news is right. I tell you what, it's all because of the Prime Minister.
Not lost a game under the Labour government of 2024.
Is football coming home, Prime Minister?
It looks like it.
Well, welcome. It's good that we had a long conversation on the phone when you won. Give me your hand there, pal. And we're the best of allies maybe in the whole world. And we really need to continue to cooperate. And a lot we can talk about. And I think that to start off, we can talk about what we call football, we call soccer. By the way, soccer has become incredibly popular here in the United States. It really is growing. And at any rate, there's a lot going on. I think you're seeking closer ties in Europe. It's good for all of us, the Transatlantic Alliance. I think it's a great idea that we're going to be working together on. I thought we had a good meeting today, NATO.
Very good.
I thought we had a good meeting, and I think things are moving in the right direction. I feel really optimistic about where things are moving. But welcome.
So there you go.
Yeah.
So a huge amount packed in there.
And I should say, I rather unkindly made a glib gag about Biden not knowing where he was during that. And you shouldn't joke about dementia and stuff like this. But there's no question that is a frail man, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's an impaired man.
Yeah.
It's an infirm man. I'm not a neurologist. I don't know what condition he's suffering from.
Yeah.
But it isn't just...
It's more than old age.
No,
isn't it? I know 81-year-olds.
Oh.
Listen, my dad at 81 was playing football with the kids and dancing about.
Yeah, I mean,
still sharp,
I mean, it's interesting. It's funny you should say that because I have such a spectacular and interesting social life. Last night I looked up some 81-year-olds, right?
Yeah, okay.
And they include Harrison Ford, Martin Scorsese, Michael Palin, Werner Herzog, Bob Woodward, John Major, and Vince Cable.
Yeah.
And none of those are
amazing.
suffering from any of those impairments. So what we're dealing with here is some sort of condition. And the NATO summit in Washington, which Starmer, it's his first big international summit and a big moment for him. The Biden camp had spun that this would be a fantastic opportunity because it would showcase Biden as a statesman to the world and reassure people and show that he was able to fulfill the obligations of the job. But in that brief clip, you can see that it's done precisely the opposite.
Yeah.
Because they've been talking about, for example, for the first time, NATO talked openly about China aiding Russia in the Ukraine war. It's a huge subject, not to speak of what's happening in the Middle East and many other topics. The real hard cutting edge of international policy. And Biden is the de facto chairman of the board. I mean, NATO is America plus friends. And patently, he is not with it and not up to it.
No, that clip there, and I commend people to look at it for a couple of reasons. One is that it has the air of not the Oval Office, not the most powerful room in the world. It has the air of a care home.
It does.
But secondly, I would just say there is a remarkably poignant juxtaposition of Joe Biden and Robert Kennedy.
Yes.
And Kennedy's
There's
a
bust
wonderful
behind him,
bronze
yeah.
bust of
Beautiful.
Robert Kennedy. And I just Googled it, and Kennedy would be 99 now had he lived. And, had he lived, you think about the difference in world affairs would have been absolutely remarkable.
And also the difference in age between him and Biden is not...
It's not that
great.
18 years.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm moving, I don't know about you, but I'm moved now decisively from a position of having, a degree of sympathy for Biden because he's a great American and he's done the world great service by beating Trump. And I think it's worth had a pretty effective presidency, to something approaching anxiety and anger because What's happening now is that by his stubbornness and the deference of those around him, the Democrat elite is effectively handing the presidency to Trump.
Yeah.
And it's a sort of it's a lethal combination of sentimentality and fatalism and cowardice.
Yes.
And there's no room for any of that.
Well, Matt, let's just say one thing boldly so that people understand. The fact is, he cannot beat Trump.
No, I mean what?
And he might be the only senior Democrat who can't beat Trump.
He's in precisely the opposite position to what he was in 2020, where it became apparent that the only person with a chance of gathering an electoral coalition to beat Trump was Joe Biden.
Yeah,
he is now, as you say, the only senior Democrat with no chance.
Yeah.
And this was their idea. The June the 27th debate, which was the beginning of the ongoing disaster, was his team's idea. Let's have an early debate. Let's knock on the head once and for all these vicious rumours and lies that the president is not fit for office. And then we can move on to destroying Trump. It had the inverse effect, which was that an election that had essentially focused up to that point mostly, not wholly, but mostly upon Trump's character, his felonies, his conviction, the fact he'd been twice impeached, he'd been found liable for rape by a jury in a civil trial, he was an insurrectionist, that's quite a big one, has now unbelievably been eclipsed by the question of Biden's fitness for office. And as Bill Clinton once said, Americans prefer strong but wrong over weak but right. And we are watching a agonizing sort of example of that.
And we had George Clooney in the New York Times. And George Clooney, a lot of people will say he's just a Hollywood actor, but he's not. He's a huge fundraiser for the Democrats.
And hitherto a very loyal ally of Biden's and a personal friend. So,
and for him to come and say in the most public forum that Joe Biden is not the man he was 4 years ago, never mind 10 years ago. It's astonishing, but it's true. It's a fact.
And you've got a drip of senior figures. Senator Michael Bennet of Colorado, Democrats, said on CNN on Tuesday, Trump might win it by a landslide now. Peter Welch, the senator from Vermont, a very Democrat state, said in the Washington Post today, Thursday, that Biden should step aside. And there are a number of people coming forward with that view from both the lower and upper house. But the most interesting one, I thought, was Nancy Pelosi, the former Speaker of the House, because she is a person who weighs every word. I mean, she's a sort of master criminologist of Washington. And what she said was, and this I was in a television interview, she said, it's up to the president to decide if he is going to run. We're all encouraging him to make the decision because time is running short. What does she mean by that? Well, she knows that he has decided. I mean, he wrote a 2-page letter to both Democrats in both houses on Monday, very strongly worded, almost bombastic, declaring he decided he was going to run and everyone should back off. He also called a very popular morning show called Morning Joe on that day, MSNBC, and ranted about how he wasn't going to let the elites keep him away from the nomination. And if anyone fancied having it out with him, they should come to the convention in Chicago and do so. But he has decided he's going to stick with it. So what Pelosi was really doing there was pretending that he hadn't and giving him some room to reconsider. Yeah. And in the midst of all that, there have been these unbelievably damaging rows over things like it emerged that a neurologist called Dr. Kevin Cannard, a Parkinson's expert, had been to the White House 8 times in an 8-month period. Yeah. And there was a really tense standoff in the press room with Karine Jean-Pierre, who's the press secretary to Biden, having it out with the press about whether or not this neurologist had seen Biden, and if so, how many times. And this has completely reframed the race.
Totally. It's
this is now the issue.
It makes you wonder, is there something wrong with our democratic structures, really, that we can get to this stage where it's basically in the hands of a man who we believe is cognitively impaired.
Yeah.
And if he's impaired now, what's he going to be like in 5 years' time at the end of his...
Whoever wins this election on November the 5th has to be able to serve till January the 20th, 2029. Now, there is no way the guy that we just heard speaking with Starmer is that person.
No.
So what can you do about it? Well, there are various ways of removing a president. One is to impeach him of high crimes and misdemeanors, but unfortunately old age is not a criminal offence, so that's not out. Yeah. Then there is the 25th Amendment of the Constitution, which was passed in, I think, 1967, and Section 4 of that enables the Vice President, Kamala Harris, and half the cabinet to effectively sack the president if he, quote, is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office.
And Matt, am I right in recalling that the last time this amendment was talked about was during Trump's presidency?
Very much so, and probably, in terms of danger to the Republic, probably with even more reason. But it's a measure of how difficult it is to do anything with it, that it wasn't enacted, because Mike Pence, although he did come through in the end by certifying the election in 2021, he was never going to lead what Trump would instantly have presented as a coup against him. Yeah. And I think that there's no chance that Kamala Harris is going to lead the cabinet to actually removing Biden from office. The only path forward is for Biden to step aside. As you say, it is all actually down to him.
What role is... Well, that's partially true, isn't it? What role is Jill Biden playing in all of this?
Enormous. And of course, people are drawing comparisons with Woodrow Wilson's wife, Edith, who was the first lady throughout his presidency. And he was basically out of action with illness for many, many months at that time, and she was the de facto president. But of course, this was in a time when such things, though totally improper, could be
hushed away.
They never came out at the time, although there was a great deal of speculation.
The American public didn't really realise that Franklin Roosevelt was disabled.
No, absolutely not.
He died.
Absolutely not. Yeah. So what you have here is a president who has, in a sense, Biden's superpower has always been his ability to turn adversity into advantage. But there's a shelf life on that superpower. The one adversity that you can't recover from is getting old with some sort of impairment. That never reverses. So
but Matt, why is this most patriotic man? Maybe the answer is just vanity and pride. But why is this most patriotic man? Because there's no question about his patriotism. About to make a decision, or has made a decision, that literally imperils the Republic. Because he must know that this is only going to end one way.
I completely agree with you. And I think the problem is that it's possible to believe two things at once. The first is, he knows as well as anyone that a second Trump presidency means a series of dire consequences. It wouldn't just mean a change in presidency. It's quite likely that the Democrats, as a consequence of down ticket, would lose the Senate. They would have no chance of regaining the House. So you'd have House, Senate, presidency, and Supreme Court, all conservative. And then you have the prospects of this loose-knit Project 2025, which has all sorts of scary stuff in it.
And we should talk about that. That is effing terrifying.
And the immunity which the Supreme Court has handed to the president as a result of its latest ruling. One example of how scary it is that one of the most senior figures in Project 2025, Kevin Roberts, the president of the Heritage Foundation, said that it would involve what he called a second American Revolution, which would remain, quote, bloodless if the left allow it to be.
Yeah. Now, in other words, the flip side is it'll be bloody if they don't.
Do it if you do as you're told, or do it at the end of a gun.
This is like.
So that's but the answer to your question.
Astonishing, isn't it?
Biden knows that's the risk. The trouble is that he is utterly convinced, in a way that now borders on the pathological narcissistic, that he is the only person that can beat Trump. That they have, I think he sees them as sort of conjoined in destiny together. He beat him in 2020.
Yeah.
He kept the red wave at bay in the midterms in 2022. and he can do it again in 2024. Now, it's the last bit that's wrong because, actually, when you're 81, 4 years is a long time.
Yeah.
And it's a very long time. And in fact, you go back to clips of him in 2020, he's a different human being.
Yeah.
But he regards his stubbornness as essential to his character. And the more that people in the press and in the media and around him in the sort of broader sense say, shouldn't you think about stepping down, the more he adopts a sort of brace position and says, no way.
Yeah.
And I think that actually the only way of getting rid of him is something that will require courage of the Democratic Party that I'm sceptical they possess, which is effectively a Kane mutiny. I mean, they've really got to, in huge numbers, risk coming out and saying, you have to go, Mr. President.
But isn't that in itself a form of insurrection, ironically?
Well, no, because it's a democracy and you can say what you I mean, they have no power.
I mean, if Biden says, I'm going nowhere...
Well, that's his... And
we're stuck with it, aren't we?
So he is entitled. I mean, one of the problems with a presidential rather than a parliamentary system, I mean, one of the great things you could argue about the system we have is it's comparatively easy to get rid of a prime minister.
Yeah.
I mean, because there are both mechanisms within the parties, which the Conservatives in particular have made huge use of, and there are also brutal mechanisms through the parliamentary system to get rid of prime ministers because they sit in the House of Commons apart from anything else, and they have to command a majority. Presidency is not like that.
Yeah.
A president can have a Congress and a Senate that are hostile to him. It's not very easy, but he can still serve out his term of office, and presidents have done so.
Yeah.
So getting rid of Biden when he doesn't want to be got rid of is extremely hard. And, I now think that the overwhelming likelihood is that there is going to be a second Trump presidency, which is a fantastical sentence to say, to utter.
I've listened to a lot of American commentators who have said that Biden will be gone by the end of this month. That and some saying that actually what will happen is he'll hand the presidency over.
Well,
I know that you think that's a preposterous scenario.
Might. Yeah. Well, I mean, the other thing, of course, which is a function of his impaired cognitive state, is that it's impossible to forecast with any certainty what he'll do from one day to the next.
Yeah.
So it's plausible, but I mean, what has happened is that after the debate disaster, there was a 101 comms strategy, which was, okay, that was just a disaster. We now send him out on every channel to be interviewed, freewheeling, podcasts even, the big podcasts in America, which have a really central role in their politics. We make him do town halls, Q&As, roaming across the stage. We only do teleprompter things when we have to. It's been the opposite. He's done an interview with George Stephanopoulos last Friday, which lasted 22 minutes and did not assuage anyone's doubts. No. And then he phoned in, as I said earlier, into Morning Joe on MSNBC. And that's it. And I think he's being interviewed he's doing a press conference tonight, Thursday, to go with NATO, which, his press team have ludicrously called a big boy press conference. A big boy press conference?
What does that mean?
Well, it means that he won't have any teleprompter notes and
Are you serious?
Yes, I am. No,
this is like when you graduate from this is potty training stuff.
It's like, unbelievable. You
can go and wipe your own bottom, Mr. President.
100%. And then he's doing an interview with Lester Holt on NBC. But by now, we should have, if it's true as they claim, and he claims he had a bad night.
Yeah.
Right. Well, you might say you can't have a bad night if you're president. I mean, airline pilots aren't allowed to have a bad night. Right. Sorry, I crashed the plane. I just had a bad night. Get on my case. Take it easy. So there's that. But there's also, this notion that it was just a bad night and not a condition. Patently, it is a condition. Yeah. So the question now facing the Democratic Party in the first instance, America in the second, but also the world. Because, this is not just a domestic question at all. I mean, who wins the presidency is always important to the rest of the world. But in this case, if Trump wins, NATO, the war in Ukraine, the West's relationship with China, trade tariffs, brackets trade war, climate change agreements, etc.
Everything is imperiled.
All imperiled.
Yeah.
I have no idea, for example, what he would do in the Middle East. I dread to think, actually, because I think that, his position, as far as I understand it, is that, the problem with the Israelis is they've let too many cameras in and haven't been brutal enough. Great. Just when we're on the cusp of a ceasefire.
Yeah.
But because Trump is a man who has instincts, not beliefs, one definitely can't forecast what he'd do.
Yeah. And I think this is the bigger problem where, maybe people are thinking, well, all right, let's give Biden all the goodwill in the world, and maybe people will, against Trump, seeing the latent evil that is Donald Trump, give Biden a win. And then it will be okay because he can sit there with his team, and the economy will. But it's so much more than that. The presidency, isn't it? He is the spokesperson for the Western world.
He is.
And literally, communication is a huge part of that job. He needs to be able to articulate in front of a camera strength and ambition and a sense of democracy.
Yes.
And if he can't do that, Putin and Xi and all the rest of them will be absolutely having a field day.
They already are.
Yeah.
I mean, that's quite clear that they already are. I remember when the Trump threat first started to become real in 2016, and there was a line that, don't worry, he'll be fine because of the people around him.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, this is the sort of mirror image of that, which is, it assumes, by the way, that he gets re-elected, which I think he won't. But let's say he was. Yeah. It's okay because of all the good people around him. Well, you don't elect an oligarchy when you elect a president. You elect an individual. And in that, the famous Hillary Clinton attack ad on, rather unfairly, on Barack Obama in 2008, which was, the phone rings at 3 a.m., who answers it, right? There's a security crisis. Well, not bloody Biden, that's for sure. I mean, I do think that we've now moved into a mode of clear and present danger where, he is set to lose. I mean, the polls are now shifting quite significantly in the key states.
Yeah.
Biden might just win the popular vote, but in the electoral college calculations, he's now
which is all that matters.
Is a clear lose, right? Yeah. And I think this is progressive politics at its absolute worst. First of all, there's a sort of sentimental poor old Uncle Joe, right? And the second thing is, well, you should have done all this before. Do you think? Yeah, I know. And but the worst one is, why aren't you saying Trump should stand down? Yeah. And the answer to that is, mate, we've all been saying Trump should be in prison.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not. There's no symmetry here.
That's right.
We're not saying being nice to Donald and saying you carry on. Yeah. We're saying, in order to beat him, there has to be a plausible Democrat candidate. And at the moment, there isn't one. And the only way, and it's now a Hail Mary pass, it really is for Biden to step aside and to be what's being called a blitz primary at the convention in Chicago.
Yeah.
And, you bring together Kamala Harris, Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, Gavin Newsom, governor of California, whoever else is, and it could be energizing, because the one thing that has sort of united America is they don't want a rematch of 2020, right?
No.
Could be energizing. Could also be mayhem.
Well, I mean, the last time it was in Chicago in 1968...
It's not a happy precedent,
it was
right?
Absolute mayhem, wasn't
And by the way, that's a very important point, because Democrats are incredibly superstitious.
Yeah.
And they remember Lyndon Johnson standing down, Bobby Kennedy being assassinated, mayhem in Chicago. All of this weighs heavily on their minds. But the trouble is, now is the time to pull themselves together. There are no good options, but as always in these situations, inaction is a choice.
Yeah.
And this is history being made.
I have I don't know, this is shared by you, maybe even more so, a deep sense of foreboding about what's about to unravel.
Because we're all still chipper, and rightly so, about what happened last week in this country, and it matters. And it's good that Le Pen was kept at bay in France. That's good.
But these are minor affairs.
But
compared to this.
if this happens, we are bang in trouble, and so is the whole sort of principle of liberal democracy. Because if a man who's been, twice impeached, 34 felony charges and lots more still to come, and found guilty of sexual assault, etc., can return to the presidency, having been beaten, because the incumbent is surrounded by people who are too, cowardly to do what is necessary.
Or self-centered as well.
Or self-centered,
selfish,
because, this is that's a very important point, is that I smell a lot of professional self-examination in all of this.
Yeah.
And when I first worried about this was when at Davos, Jamie Dimon, who is arguably the most powerful banker in the world, head of JP Morgan Chase, said in an interview, Trump was pretty good last time. He'd probably be fine. And there are a lot of very senior people in the American establishment and even in the Democratic Party who are thinking, 4 years, it's okay. As if in that 4 years, fundamental structural changes probably won't be made to the Republic.
Yeah, of course.
That is a sort of unforgivable careerism, I think.
Yeah.
But we are literally powerless on this side of the pond.
Well, also the particular selfish behaviour, and I might be wrong, but is of the family as well, the Biden family. Who that's what's become clear is just how close and how tight the group advising the president are. And it's his family, basically. Everyone else is saying, Joe, come on. But the family is saying, no, you can do it, you can do it. And
again, it's when a strength becomes a weakness. Because he's been very, very close throughout their marriage to Jill Biden. It's a real love match. And she's a very influential person. And some of the sort of Lady Macbeth stuff is a bit cruel, I think. Because I think she does want his best interest. He has been incredibly loyal to his very wayward son, Hunter. Not so great to hear that Hunter Biden has been attending not only campaign meetings, but White House meetings.
Incredible.
There is a time when the most loving thing to do is to say the hardest thing.
Yeah.
But it is quite clear to me that none of those people, and the sort of people around him like Ron Klein and Mike Donilon and sort of advisors whom he's known for decades, none of them are saying this to him.
Do you know, I think, Matt, that the proof of his impairment is the fact that he can't see the obvious thing, which is that everything is better if he steps down, including his life, his legacy, the Republic, everything. The chances of beating the man he hates most in the world, everything is better.
He is about to flush down the toilet half a century of service to the Republic.
Yeah.
Very few people have dominated the life of America as he has. He's been a master of the Senate, as Lyndon was. He has been vice president, which is a thankless job, for 8 years to Barack Obama, and there were tensions, but he did it. He stood aside to let Hillary run in 2016 against Trump, though he thought he could beat Trump, and came back in 2020, and to his great credit, listened to the voices in the Democratic Party like Bernie Sanders and AOC and others like that who are advocating a more progressive form of democratic politics than he was comfortable with, to build a really good winning coalition. And they got rid of Trump. And now he is about to do exactly the opposite.
To toss all that
this
into
is
the
what
bin.
this will be, as it were, on his metaphorical gravestone. He will be the man that let back in Donald J. Trump, which is not a happy epitaph.